101 Ways to Die is available now on the PS4, Xbox One, and Steam for $12.99. The basic idea involves you attempting to kill splats before they can escape. Think a reverse Lemmings game, where instead of trying to keep creatures alive, you try to kill them. Can the game keep you entertained with melting creatures in lava pits and crushing them with electric boulders? Or will the game itself feel like being strung up in a torture rack? That's what I'm here to answer, but before I begin, this key was obtained from the developer for review purposes, but won't change my opinion of the game in the end. So the game is a puzzle game, with you attempting to figure out how to best use your assortment of traps to launch the splats into the environment. Each level works on a 3-star system. Beat the level's basic requirement to earn 1, which is usually limiting the number of splats that can escape. The other additional stars will be earned from using specific traps and combos. These stars unlock new levels, which open up new traps and more complicated environments. The game is at its best when you're allowed to be creative. Using unconventional ways to kill a splat can be rather fun, as I had fun with this pinball variant that I made here. When the level allows for the player the room to experiment, then you do feel like a mad scientist, concocting up new ways to torture your creations. But sadly, as you're going to find out very, very quickly, that was a rare occurrence, as 101 Ways to Die found 101 ways to annoy and frustrate me. While I've seen people say it's hard, that's not the word I would use here. What I would say is that it's misleading, as the difficulty comes from frustration regarding the world that's been built here, and a focus on trial and error due to inconsistent rule sets and a lack of player knowledge. See, puzzle games need that direct feedback and direct information correlation to succeed, and that's something that 101 Ways does rather poorly. For example, when placing a bumper to have a creature be thrown by it, you are relying on the line indicator here to be accurate to the launched creature's path. When it isn't, and your creature ends up hitting a barrier, you're wondering why exactly you're bothering with the line placement to begin with. The player now is forced to refine the angle based on that experience, and it makes you wonder why it didn't tell you that in the first place. It also doesn't help that the game also seems to have a problem with rules in its own world. Let's take for example these two runs that I'm showing you side by side. See any real differences between the two? No? Well, I'm having problems seeing it too, but apparently one satisfied this requirement, and one didn't. It's really unclear exactly how one was wrong and one was right, and when the player is left with this confusion, it feels like they got through it with dumb blind luck. And in a puzzle game, that's a major problem. It's also not obvious what some of the properties of the traps are at first, fans in particular. Apparently fans have a draft behind them that draws enemies in, but based on the visuals, can you really blame a player for not thinking that's the case? Why isn't there an air effect behind the fans? That would get the point across and do the job. Instead, it's just something that you discover via trial and error. And boy, do I love games that teach me via trial and error. That's sarcasm, by the way. The game drove me up the wall with the rules. Why did that mine not kill the splat? It seems like a standard explosion, and yet that one doesn't seem to work, and yet others do. Why does that explosion result in knockback, but another one cause death with no different visual indicators between them? The information I've processed is now jumbled at this point, and now when I'm supposed to combine traps, I don't know what is what. Control-wise, the game is just confusing. Using buttons like backspace for cancel doesn't follow standard PC conventions and feels awkward to use. While dragging paths is implemented okay, menu navigation feels awkward. And Xbox 360 controller users? No, it ain't happening for you here, despite the fact that it's supported on the Xbox One. The list goes on, lack of zoom levels to take advantage of larger playing fields, performance issues here and there, misleading labels makes the player wonder what he's doing wrong. This game is a user interface nightmare most of the time, and it's a genre where it makes such a big difference. The combination of all these elements just make for a game that annoyed me from the get-go and felt so awkward to play. Sure, the game can get better in later levels as more creativity and options open up, but I already wanted to quit by that point. I can't recommend the game to anyone. There are just so many better options out there.